about organza. Organza is a very thin, delicate fabric, and it's man-made. Now, mostly it's made out of polyester or nylon, and we are using like a polyester organza that we stock in 10 different colors at the embroider shop. You do get silk organza, but we are not using silk organza simply because it needs to be dry cleaned and it doesn't work well with a heat burning tool. While we use the nylon or the polyester because it really melts very easily once we use it with a heat burning tool. So we stock it in 10 different colors, and a very important product that we use for the organza technique that goes with the organza is of course the water soluble stabilizer. So the water soluble stabilizer is what we sandwich in between two layers of organza, and it is a perfect product to use because it dissolves and it helps to not make a bulky embroidery. And that's one of the reasons why the organza is such a fantastic technique. It's because it's super thin and it makes your embroideries look really neat. Now, if you are going to make 3D type of embroideries like flowers or butterflies or like these embellishments, you are going to use colored organza. But sometimes you can make designs like patches or the iron-on applique technique, which we will get to, and then it doesn't matter, you can actually use any color organza. So we stock this bulk packs of organza because this is when you are going to use it as a stabilizer for the properties of the organza, but you're not going to see the organza. We will get to that at the patches part. One very important thing about the organza technique is the thread you are going to use. Now, some of you might have done this technique before and you have tried it with polyester thread, and then you're probably going to start laughing now, because if you are using polyester thread and a heat burning tool and you will simply touch the thread with the heat burning tool, it is going to melt. The rayon will also melt if you hold it there the whole time, but it's much more durable. That is why we are using rayon thread in our designs, because when we need to use the burning tool, it can take the heat and help us to trim. Remember, the organza is synthetic because we need it to really melt easily. So we are using the rayon thread basically as a barrier between the heat burning tool and our organza, and that's why we use rayon thread. Whenever you are making 3D type of designs like this specific flower, you can see that there is red at the bottom, red at the top. You want to make sure that your bobbin thread matches the top thread, because if you're going to use a white bobbin and you're making like this green leaves or the red petal, then it's going to be red at the top, white at the bottom, and that you do not want. So whenever you're doing 3D type of organza projects, make sure that your bobbin thread is matching your top thread. And what thread are we using? We are using rayon thread only. Now, a quick tip on rayon. I love rayon thread. It's my absolute favorite, and you don't always have to stitch with rayon thread. We've got many type of designs, even like the lace and our applique designs, that we also use polyester thread. But whenever we work with the organza technique, or let me rather say whenever it acquires a heat burning tool, you need to use rayon thread only. Alright, but one thing about rayon, you might want to turn the speed of your machine down a notch when working with rayon thread, because I'm going to say my favorite thing, and I want you to remember this, that rayon can take heat, but rayon can't take speed. Alright, so don't speed when you're using rayon. It will frustrate you because it will break often. So remember that rayon can take heat, but rayon can't take speed. So what type of needle will you use when working with organza? Since it's a very fine fabric, you don't want to use a thick needle, because a thick needle will basically cut into these fibers and make it split inside the organza. So you want to use a fine needle like the 75/11, or if you're going to combine it with other fabrics like in the flower, which we will get to, you can use the 80/12 needle. Alright, so the other thing that's very important with the organza technique is we're going to need a heat burning tool. Now at the embroider shop, we have got the perfect embroidery heat burning tool that was developed specifically for the organza technique with a very fine tip, and this is the one we use. We've got a very unique container, which is fun because it's beautiful in the sewing room, and our heat burning tool is called the Burnsy. Now the Burnsy is neatly packed inside with this really fine embroidery tip, which makes it great. But besides being a great tool, what I love about the Burnsy is the little stand is mounted inside of the lid. And this is a very neat feature, because now usually people throw away the box when it's dilapidated, and usually this little stand is still inside and they just simply throw it away and then they don't have the stand. We mounted the stand inside of the lid so that it's inside of the heat burning tool. It's all packed very nicely. My favorite tool to use with the organza technique. Now I'm going to show you now the basics of the organza technique, and then I'm going to make a change each time. I'm going to take the organza technique, I'm going to apply a change to it, and then it's going to become a whole new project or technique. Just a quick tip again on the burning tool. If you would like to clean your heat burning tool, because remember we are using the water soluble stabilizer a lot, and when water soluble stabilizer gets hot, or actually when you burn it, it can kind of like gunk up. If you want to remove the gunk, simply take a ball of aluminum foil, and while it's hot you can simply clean your heat burning tool. So that is how you clean your Burnsy. Alright, so let's get started with the basics of the organza technique and applying some changes, and let's see what we can do with the organza technique. I'm going to demonstrate the basics of the organza technique on a simple butterfly, not specifically because I want to show you how to make a butterfly, but because I want to show you the rules of the organza technique so that you know the rules before we start changing it to make new techniques. So the first rule with organza is always that we are going to use it as a stabilizer, 2 layers of organza and 1 water solvay. Now when I say 2 layers of organza, I mean that I've got 1 layer on top, I've got my water solvay sandwiched in between, and I've got organza at the bottom layer. So I'm going to take my hoop, I've got organza at the bottom, water solvay in between, organza on top, and you will simply hoop it. Then you're going to stitch out whatever you are doing. Remember, if you are doing 3D embroidery, make sure that your bobbin thread is matching the top thread so that you can actually have a good result if you want a blue butterfly, so that it's blue all over. Alright, so the organza technique is super easy. It's like for beginners, but it looks like advanced embroidery, and you get the most beautiful outcome for your machine embroidery. So 2 layers of organza, water solvay, bobbin thread matching the top thread. Remember, what thread am I using? I am using rayon thread. The 40 weight I'm using from Sulky. And then once you hoop it, you're going to stitch out whatever you want to stitch out. There you can see I've got my front wings and my back wings. And now once you're done, you're going to take it out of the hoop and you're going to cut around your embroidered wings, like in the butterfly or whatever you're making, petals. So you will cut around the edges close to the satin stitches, but not into the satin stitches. Alright, now remember, once I've cut it with my scissors, there's still like little hairs or organza pieces of fabric sticking out over there. Remember, the solvay is going to dissolve, right? So you don't worry about that. You basically just want to seal around the edges. Now, you can do it two ways. You can either first submerge your design into the water so that the water soluble stabilizer dissolves. But remember, when we're doing 3D type of designs and you kind of like still want to have a little bit of fixative inside so that you can shape your design, you don't want to rinse it out completely. So once you're done stitching, you've trimmed around the edges, you'll simply take your heat burning tool and you are going to go around the edges and simply trim with your heat burning tool, just basically touching. You don't want to stand too long, although it's rayon, just trim it. And you're gently going to trim it and basically seal your organza pieces of fabric at the edges so they don't unravel. And that is how you do the organza technique. So all there is to the organza technique is I'm using 2 layers of organza, water solvay in between. I make sure I've used rayon thread, bobbin thread matching the top thread. I'll stitch out whatever I want to stitch out. I'm going to first cut around, or I can show you other ways that you can actually remember. Another important thing, whenever you use your heat burning tool, you want to protect your surface. So if you're working on a plastic table or a wooden table, make sure that you cover it with a piece of tile or glass so that you don't burn. Always be cautious when working with a heat burning tool. Now you can put it down and you don't have to cut it, and you can simply start cutting right onto the tile, or you can first cut around with your scissors and then simply trim it around the edges with the heat burning tool. So now that you know how to do the organza technique, let's go and apply our first change to make it something completely different. Now we are going to go on to, whenever you are using the organza technique for doing 3D flowers. Now today I'm not trying to teach you how to do flowers. That is one of our next webinars. I'm just showing you how you can apply changes to the organza technique and it will become something different. If you look at one of these designs, or let me show you this one, and you would look at the organza, you can basically see through, right? So if you pick it up, you can see through the flowers. Can you see the green there? Right, you can see through that. So to make these flowers, I've used 2 layers of organza and the water solvay. So I've used pink organza and I've used green organza for making the 2 layers. So when you are using 2 layers of organza and the solvay and you will make a flower, it will be a see-through flower. If you look at these little flowers I'm showing you over here, this was made with the organza technique only. It's 2 layers of colored organza, solvay, and you would make it. But you could change the organza technique by substituting one of your layers of organza, change it with something different, and then make it a non-see-through. So this is my flower and it's a non-see-through. And when it's a non-see-through, we call it, it's becoming a fabric flower, alright? So what I'm trying to show you now is the difference between a see-through and a non-see-through. So if you are going to make see-through flowers, you just use the organza technique as is. If you are going to make a fabric flower, we need to substitute 1 layer. Now what did I do here? I've got organza on top. I still got my water solvay in between, but I've got a piece of fabric at the back. Now what fabric did I use over here? I used what you call batiste or broadcloth, which is a mixture. It's basically 35% cotton, 65% polyester. And this is the secret in using this with the organza technique. You cannot use 100% cotton when working with a burning tool. If you're going to take 100% cotton and you try to go around the edges, you will see it looks like it starts to snow. It goes up in ashes, alright? So 100% cotton do not melt. You want something that can melt. Now there's a lot of fabrics that you can use. You just have to look at the fiber content of the fabric, and if it's a meltable fabric like evening fabrics, like satin, golden lame type of fabrics, and of course then if it's a mixture where it's more polyester than cotton, you know it works well. So for a non-see-through flower, you need to use a polyester type of fabric at the back or at the bottom, water solvay in between, and the organza. The rest of the technique stays exactly the same because my bobbin thread is matching my top thread. You can see I've got red and red over there, and you're just going to stitch out whatever you stitch out. And I'm going to show you two. I'm going to cut out one first. So once you're done, you will simply cut out your design, and you want to go close to the edges, alright, but not into your satin stitch. So I'm just simply trimming close to the edges, and remember I'm using rayon thread only because I'm using my heat burning tool. So you kind of just want to take away the excess fabric, and what I'm doing now is when I take my heat burning tool, you will see that it simply trims away the excess fabric. Remember, the solvay is still going to dissolve, and you can just go around the edges and you can see that it's burning away the fabric, and it's actually melting the fabric over there pretty well, and that would not happen with cotton. So whenever you want to make a non-see-through, just make sure that the fabric you are using has got a high polyester content. And you can also take your heat burning tool and you can go straight, remember the tile part, but you can go straight onto the tile without first using the scissors. Simply go around, and it goes like butter, or a hot knife through butter. You can just go around the edges. It's actually very easy that way to cut it out with the heat burning tool. You just want to make sure you've cut. Now what I'm trying to show you over here is that it will basically cut out your fabric without the scissors because it can melt. Alright, so you see that? So this is the way that you can cut it out with the heat burning tool. So with that said, whenever you're making a non-see-through flower, substitute the bottom layer, always organza on top, water solvay in between, and a suitable type of fabric turns the organza into a fabric technique basically. Now I'm going to show you later on how we do the satin organza technique, where I'm using the organza on top, solvay in between, and I'm using my satin, which melts very great. I'll show that to you in a video. But let's go on to the next technique. If I apply some changes to the organza technique, what can it become next? Isn't this beautiful? All those beautiful flowers. We'll be doing flower making one of these days, and I'm going to show you everything you need to know of the art of creating embroidered flowers with your machine. But let's just quickly go over the organza technique when making flowers. I've got another type of flower over here, and when you look at it, you will see that it's fully embroidered. You can see the back. There's no way you can see the organza in this. It's like fully stitched. It's absolutely beautiful. It shapes beautiful. Just look at the green leaves. It looks so real. So when you look at this, it's fully thread. So basically this one is like fully stitched. You can't see the organza. So in other words, I could have used red organza or white organza or any color organza. You wouldn't be able to see it because it's fully covered with thread at the back. So you can also use organza only as a stabilizer, 2 layers of organza, water solvy, and you can create fully stitched flowers. Or you can create fabric flowers like I've just shown you, that is a non-see-through flower. And then of course we can use just the organza technique, that is a see-through technique. It depends on what you want to do. You can make see-through flowers, you can make non-see-through flowers, or you can use it as a stabilizer for stitching fully stitched flowers. Now a quick note on this, you could turn any one of these patterns either into a see-through, or you can make it a fabric flower. If you would like to make this specific poppies, let's say you want to put it on an evening outfit and you want to make it a little bit more fancy, what you could do is you could use your green organza on top, water solvy in between, and a very nice sparkly evening green fabric, or like satin, and then it will become a full or a non-see-through flower. And the same for this one, that you can't see right through, it'll have a fabric backing. Just make sure you are using suitable fabrics. So you can use the organza technique, changing it up. Same goes for this little embellishment. It's all just the organza technique. And now you've got the decision you want to make. Do I want it to be a see-through flower or a non-see-through flower? You can decide. If you want it see-through, you go for the plain organza technique, 2 layers of organza solvy, or if you want to make it a fabric flower, you can turn that into by substituting your 1 layer. And remember, the organza is always on top, solvy in the middle, and you decide what comes at the bottom for what kind of project you want to need it. But that's not all. There's something else we can do with the organza. Let's see. Probably my favorite way to use the organza technique is for creating patches. I can talk about patches all day long, but today I'm just going to show you how you can use the organza technique creating patches. I'm not teaching you all the secrets about patches. Patches is a whole webinar on its own, and I will tell you more about durability, different surfaces you can use it on, adhesive methods. So that's a different webinar. We'll get to the patches, but let's just talk about organza and the purpose of using organza. So with the organza technique, it is so simple. Remember, you are not going to see the back of the patch because you're going to attach it onto something. And the other thing is that since it's fully stitched, the organza is covered. That means that I could have used blue organza, pink organza, or any organza, and it wouldn't matter. And that's why for making patches I use this gray color, which is a very good quality, because it doesn't matter what is the color. So this 10-yard pack is fantastic once you start making patches. And believe me, once you understand how you can make patches and how you can use it in ways in machine embroidery that you did not think about before, you will be amazed what you can do with patches. But patches is super easy when you're using the organza technique. Now, there's a lot of ways that you can make patches, and I'm not saying that this is the only way, but for what I'm trying to do and the way we like patches at the Embroider Shop, we love to do the organza technique. The one reason why I love to use the organza technique is because my patches is super thin. So sometimes you can apply one of these patches onto like quilts or bedding or onto your jeans or children clothing, and it becomes a beautiful piece, and you will not even see that it wasn't stitched onto your base design. All right, I'm not going to share all the tips, what you can do, ways you can do it. We'll get to patch making in detail and I'll teach you all about that. But for today, what I want you to know is I'm using the organza technique because I don't want the stick biker patches. I want fine, beautiful patches that looks like it's been embroidered flat onto my surface. To get that result, it's easy. I'm going to use the organza technique. It doesn't matter what color organza you're using making patches, and what also don't matter is if you are using white bobbin thread, because we're making patches, you're not going to see the patch or right at the back. Once you put it onto something, it doesn't matter. So to make a patch, simply hoop 2 layers of organza, the water solvay in between. You will stitch out your patch, you will cut it to the edge, you are going to trim it, and you're going to make a patch. Later on I will show you in the next webinar ways to attach your patches, ways to make them more durable, to make them last on whatever surface you put them on. But organza is the base of a very thin, beautiful patch. Think about things like a onesie. Do you like to hoop a onesie? No, you either have to take that onesie apart or you've got a puckered onesie. I don't hoop a onesie. But what if you can make beautiful embroidered patches and now use patch bond and add it to the onesie? Just think about the possibilities of taking your patches to a handbag, to a jeans, without taking the seams of the jeans out. Enough about patches. We've got a whole webinar on patches teaching you the secrets. But just so that you know, the backbone of patches is the organza technique. Now that you know how to make patches, let's see how we can do something different and turn it into something beautiful using the organza technique to break out of the hooped in feeling of machine embroidery. Let's have a look. A technique I like a lot is called the iron-on applique technique. Now, what do we mean by the iron-on applique technique? Let's see. Now, if you look at the size of my hand next to this design, you can see that it's a pretty big design, right? You can see it's like my arm. Now, with the Solaris hoop, you can do pretty big embroideries, right? But sometimes we want to make even bigger embroideries. Like, let's say you want to put this on a giant pillow or on bedding. And now she's bigger than the hoop size, right? So we have come up with a method using the organza technique in a way, while still doing our embroidery, to break out of the hooped in feeling of machine embroidery by creating beautiful scenes. This is going to be a webinar as well, teaching you the iron-on applique technique. But in short, let's see what the iron-on technique is about. Now, she's too big to fit in any hoop, alright? When you look at her, it looks perfectly stitched out. You can't even see how she got this big. Now, I'm going to take the basket on her head and I'm taking it off. We did put little Velcro at the back because I'm demonstrating this in the class. And now I'm going to be very naughty and I'm going to undress her. Look at that. Now, this part, her face and her arms and this hairpiece was done onto my base fabric. So to get my design really large, what I did was created patches. Super thin patches. And how do you create super thin patches? Yes, you got it. The organza technique. So basically what we did, and now I want to show you that you can do 2 types of patches with the organza technique. One, you can do one that's fully stitched, right? And you can make a super thin patch. Or you can make a super thin patch and use applique and do applique like you would do applique, but creating a patch design using the organza technique. So when we are using the patch technique, you can use any color organza, and once again, this is where we use the bulk organza in one color because you're not going to see your organza. The other thing is, you don't worry about what bobbin thread you are using because you're not going to see it. But what should you worry about? You need to worry about using rayon thread. You still want to use rayon thread because the rayon thread needs to form the barrier between my heat burning tool and my organza and help it to trim perfectly without melting the thread. So I'm still using the organza technique with the rayon whenever I'm using a rayon thread, or whenever I'm using a burning tool it acquires for rayon. So this is my two patch designs, and what we simply do is with the patch bond, our other magical product that I talk about all the time, you will apply at the back and you will iron it on, and that's how it becomes a giant design. Let me quickly show you what is giant, right? This is Colonel Sanders, and this is a really big design. If you can see my hand, you can think for yourself how big this design is, right? Now, if you look at the hoop, this is the new hoop of the Babylock Solaris, and this is a 10 5/8 by 16 hoop, and you can see that there's no way that Colonel Sanders can fit in the hoop. When you look at it, there is no way you are going to tell me how this one was done, but a part of the design was done onto the base fabric, which is its body and its feet. I've made a patch out of the tail part, I made a patch out of the head part, and they were ironed onto this design, and it becomes a beautiful big design. Now think about the possibilities of using the iron-on applique technique, creating scenes, and embroidery becomes endless. You can go on forever by adding the embroideries you like, using the organza technique, and using it with your other flat embroideries. So that is the iron-on applique technique. I will be doing a webinar specifically on this subject, but that's how I can use the organza technique as well. And then one last method that we like to use the organza technique. Let's go and have a look what that could be. Who thought you could use the organza technique with making lace? Lace never ever goes out of fashion, and you can make organza lace when you are doing curtains. You can use it on evening wear or bridal wear, and it's absolutely beautiful. I will be doing in December, I'm using the magnetic continuous hoop. I will be using some tulle fabric and organza and teach you all about making continuous lace. But just so that you know, with continuous lace making, we use the organza technique, but we're only using one layer of organza with the water solving, and we stitch it out and use the continuous option of creating our designs. So organza is beautiful for making lace. So now you can see we've got see-through flowers, non-see-through flowers, we've got the fabric flowers, the full stitch flowers, we can make patches, we can do iron-on applique technique, we can do 3D embroideries and lace, and the possibilities are absolutely endless. Look at the organza technique I've used with the Soma Souls espadrille. I'm busy with a slipper over here. We are going to do a webinar on this, and I'm going to teach you making fabric poinsettia flowers, combining it with our newest Soma Soul designs, and this is going to be so much fun, and I hope to see you in my class making the 3D flowers. Now that you've seen how many things we can do with the organza technique, you will see that this will be your best friend in machine embroidery. Organza, using it with your water soluble stabilizer, your heat burning tool, and we are going to discover the most amazing ways in machine embroidery using this very simple technique. And I hope that you are inspired, starting to create wonderful things using the organza technique as your new favorite technique. I'm going to show you the satin organza technique in a little video on the butterflies that came with the Babylock Solaris design kit, and that is just to confirm everything that I've been saying. I'm going to show you a little video. So let's go and make some butterflies.